I'd like to introduce Professor Sauerheber, just a marvelous man who for the last 15 years has been really edging this battle about trying to inform people and educate people about what fluoride is, what it isn't, and how it affects the human body, how it affects the plumbing, how it, the infrastructure and all the different things involved, and trying to make headway in having the legislature take action on this, or the FDA take action on it, on the EPA take action on this. And it's been a long battle. So I just really want to show, I appreciate him, but let's just show our appreciation to Dr. Sauerheber for this battle. And I can't wait for this talk. And so Dr. Professor Sauerheber, and you'll be able to tell your credentials a lot more than I, that's why I didn't say anything. So.
Well, that's not that important, my credentials. Did most of my college work at UCSD. Anyway.
Is that too dark for you?
No, that's fine. Most of my research work for most of my career was in diabetes and insulin action, how insulin works at the membrane level. And so I really was known by the NIH as a diabetes researcher. But when I started going to teaching at Helena, it was back in '91, I got involved in fluoride in a more hands-on way than I had before. But in 1971, I worked my first science job with Dr. Benson at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography. Benson discovered the carbon dioxide fixation reaction in plant photosynthesis, and they all won the Nobel Prize for that. So I was really lucky to have got a job with him. And he's the one who first taught me what fluoride is. Industrial fluorides are all synthetic compounds, and they're all toxic calcium chelators. And so I knew from 1971 that was the case. I couldn't believe that people would actually fluoridate people through the public water supply. Since 1945, this has been going on in some places. And so I didn't really do anything hands-on, though, until around 1992, when I got more heavily involved in it because of the Hooper Bay disaster. That's where 302 people were poisoned by a toxic fluoridation overfeed. And I'll go into that a little bit more. But anyway, I brought some materials. If anyone is around who thinks that eating and swallowing fluoride is not harmful, then I would recommend reading this book by the National Research Council, Fluoride in Drinking Water, published in 2006. That's a good source of material. Also, if you think that fluoride helps your teeth when it really doesn't, this is a very good book by Philip Sutton. He's a dentist statistician, and you'll walk away knowing way more than most anyone on why fluoride does not decrease dental decay if you read this book. And if you think putting fluoride in water is legal when it isn't, all you got to do is read Dr. Conant's book, The Case Against Fluoride. Covers all the legal problems and why it's really, you're not supposed to, it's illegal to take a tomato soup can and dump it into the San Vicente Reservoir. You'll get arrested for that. But yet, people are breaking the law by dumping fluoride, which is not to treat the water and sanitize it, it's to treat you. People are doing this illegally, and if you don't believe that, just read Dr. Conant's book. And if you think fluoride had a good beginning instead of an immoral, corrupt beginning, all you have to do is read the Fluoride Deception by Christopher Bryson. This tells you the whole history of how it all started. At the end of World War II, when the FDA didn't want it to happen, but they were so scared because the military was supporting it that they didn't show the person who was supposed to speak out against it when it was going to become a public health policy. He decided not to go because he was told he would hurt the war effort if he showed up and opposed it. But that's all detailed in here. It's a very sad book to read, really depressing. So you don't have to read it if you don't want to. And then what I would like you to read are the things that I've published. I published this article. This took about a 14-year period to finally get done. This is an article that shows what happened to the person who was killed by a fluoride overfeed in Hooper Bay, Alaska. Because after the data was published and they knew that fluoride killed him, they didn't really know how fluoride did it in his body, and I was able to figure out how it did it. And that's one of the things that's in this article. This is in the Journal of Environmental and Public Health. That was published in 2013. And you can get it online for free, or I made some copies if you'd rather have one in your hand.
And you all have given me your emails, and I can make sure I can get that to you. I'll make sure I can get that on to you.
And then this article I published because of the Pagosa Springs horse disaster. I don't know if you know anything about that, but racehorses that were shipped from Fallbrook out to Pagosa Springs, which has really soft water there. The lady I know, she lost her prize, very expensive horses over a 19-year period from fluoride poisoning, because she didn't know you weren't supposed to give horses the city water. And what I did to follow up on that is I analyzed. I thought, well, gee, what happens to all the racehorses in LA when they're going to start fluoridating water in LA in 2007? So I started doing studies. I looked at racehorse data for about a 7-year period, from before fluoridation started, after it started, and then after it was lowered from 1 down to 0.7. And you wouldn't believe it, but the racehorse deaths at Los Alamitos and Hollywood Park, they basically followed the fluoride level in the water. And I looked at 250,000 racing starts. So it's not a small study. It's very clear cut. And I think what's going on is that the racehorses are really nervous because their owners expect them to do well all the time, and they have this desire to win, and so they have stomach ulcers. But veterinarians allow them to race anyway, as long as it's not too severe of a one. But the problem, I think, what was going on is when they started fluoridating the water, which turns into hydrofluoric acid in your stomach, I think horses that had these ulcers, they would get pain and trip, and then they would bust a leg, and then they're euthanized. And that's really what closed Hollywood Park. If you ever know much about Hollywood Park, it was a famous racing venue for 50 years, and it's no longer there because people just refuse to go anymore because of all the horse racing deaths. It was just too much.
Wow.
So it was torn down. We don't have Hollywood Park anymore. Los Alamitos, they figured it out because one of my chemistry students, happened to come in one day, and I explained it to him. Well, his dad happens to be the guy who breeds most of the thoroughbreds that are quarter horses, really, that go to Los Alamitos to race. And so we took the paper to his dad. His dad goes, "What the heck?" And he showed it to the racing industry. Los Alamitos switched and started using well water, and the problem subsided. And so sometimes you win. Not very often.
Good for you.
And then what else? I have handouts here for with my fluoride electrode. I measure all the fluoride levels in most of the retail bottled waters that you can buy if you're interested in one of these. Anyway, I like starting with this picture because it's one of my favorite hiking spots in Yosemite. This is Vernal Falls. I go there with my daughters a lot. There's people up there. But this is water that's obviously distilled from the ocean by the sun, evaporates back down into the snow melt, turns into nice fresh drinking water for the city of San Francisco. It's the Merced River. Has no fluoride in it. I measured it. But people are afraid that you might have Giardia in there. So I always when I go, I take my little filter, a micropore filter that makes sure no Giardia would get in the product. And I give people water when I'm up there. It's just great. It's delicious water. It's the way water is supposed to be. I always say it's the way God intended. We're supposed to have water that's like this. It's the way it's supposed to be. But if you scroll down to the next picture, this is the water that we're getting. And you guys get this water too. It comes all the way from Lake Skinner up in Temecula. This is the plant where the fluoridation occurs for all of San Diego County. It's done by the Metropolitan Water District in Los Angeles. And I knew they were going to open it up the day after I got there. I wanted to see the place. I found it, and I walked away kind of in tears looking at this thing. But that right there is a little sign that I put on the gate, and I was telling the people that when they open the valves to fluoridate people's water, this is a list of all the federal and state water laws that they would be violating. And I knew I was just doing it for my own benefit, and that they would throw it away and laugh at it, which they did. And so our water has been fluoridated in North San Diego since 2007. And so the tanks over here contain all the hazardous waste. It's fluosilicic acid, H2SiO6. It comes from the fertilizer industry, and it's just sold. They changed the label on it and call it a water additive, and it's sold to the water districts to dump straight into the water for the fluoride in it. Now the problem is because it's an acid, it lowers the pH of the water so much that they also have to have next to it all these giant tanks. This looks small here. A person would be about that tall over there. These are big as hotels. And they store Drano, caustic soda, that has to be added to re-neutralize the acid after the fluosilicic is put into the water. So every 30 tons of material that they dump into the water for fluoridation, you get 10 tons of sodium, 10 tons of silicic acid, and 10 tons of fluoride, because it's all ionized and separated into those components. And none of those belong in fresh drinking water. Neither of the three. Next page. So I put this in here because your Helix Levy water plant has statements that most water districts put on their water quality report, but it's incorrect. It's a minor point, but I just like correcting these people. When they say the furthest away that the water is that comes to here for you to drink is up at Lake Shasta, that's not the case. The furthest water comes from the headwaters of the Colorado River in west central Wyoming in the Wind River Range right here. That drains down through the Grand Canyon and down to us. So that's as far north as the city of Toronto, Canada. So you're drinking water from that far north. Right here, let me see. Anyway, I also put it up here because every one of the state capitals across the whole country now fluoridates their own citizens except for one place.
Which is that?
That's Juneau, Alaska. And I was able to go there last year. If you scroll up a little bit, we'll find out where it is. Hooper Bay, Alaska is right over here. I was able to go to Skagway, and I just, because I had done the analysis on the people that were poisoned there, I thought it was silly that I hadn't actually been to the town or even seen the water. So I made a point to take a little train up out of Skagway, and I went to the headwaters of the Yukon River right there. It's just a gorgeous place with delicious water, no fluoride, of course. But it's the terrible irony that clean water drains all the way across the state of Alaska, and right at the end, they dump the fluoride in. And these poor little Eskimos in their little village, they had lived there for 5,000 years. All of a sudden, now they had a problem because the water is so soft. Something happened to the valve system, and the overfeed was such that the fluoride level got up to 100 parts per million, and you can't taste it. And there was a 41-year-old guy, Dominic Smith. He was a member of the U.S. Coast Guard, and he had been working all day. He was really thirsty, drank a bunch of water, and it killed him because his blood level went up to about 3 parts per million, and that was published in the New England Journal of Medicine. That was in 1992, and that's what spurred me to get more heavily involved in the problem.
Does Juneau still have really good water then?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and on the cruise ship I was on, they were bragging about Ketchikan water, that they don't fluoridate it. They actually announced that on the river cruise. But most people don't want to talk about it, as you know.
They don't fluoridate water in Hawaii except on the military bases.
Yes, of course.
Yes.
Can I ask you a question? Is raw water, because you hear it now, there's raw water. Is that what you're talking about from that? Have you heard of raw water?
Well, raw water
That's
is
kind of being
what the water
popular.
we'll say is raw is like the water that Poway gets. The city of Poway is not fluoridated because they have their own filtration plant. So from MWD in LA, they don't use the same pipe that we have. We get the treated fluoridated stuff. Poway doesn't. They get raw water and they filter it themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't fluoridate in Poway.
Oh, so Poway water's good.
Yeah.
And that's raw water. The term.
No, Poway treats it to make sure it's sterile and all that.
Right.
They add aluminum like most places do to get the organic matter out. And they add chlorine to clean it, but they won't put the fluoride in. The city council in Poway, for some reason, just knows what's going on.
Okay.
The other people that know what's going on are, if you go to, say Rancho Santa Fe, they have such a huge horse population, and they know it's bad for horses because they knew about the Pagosa Springs stuff. I talked to all the administrators in there, and they said they're never going to fluoridate. So I left them a copy of my racehorse paper with them to make sure they have it on file in case the fluoridating government people, whoever they are, come around to try to make them fluoridate. They have more defense there. So because they regulate that whole system there, Rancho Santa Fe is not fluoridated. Neither is Fairbanks Ranch. Neither is Solana Beach, Cardiff, or Leucadia. So that whole swath there is regular water.
Very
I like to
nice.
point out that, Shaun White, who wins all the Olympic gold medals on the half pipe, he was born and raised in Encinitas without fluoride. So living without fluoride is just fine.
What about other states like Montana, Idaho? Do you know anything about
Well,
that?
most of the big cities are now fluoridated. The CDC, because it's under the control basically of the military, the U.S. Surgeon General. It's been a military operation since 1945, and it became a public health policy in 1950, and they just tend to tell state departments of public health, you got to fluoridate. Now, it's illegal for them to require it, but they request it. And when you get a request from somebody like a CDC official, that's the same thing as a requirement. Nobody's
Sure.
going to fight with that when you're empowered to regulate the water. But it's spread across the country, mostly in the 1960s. San Francisco, like I said, got a beautiful water from Yosemite. It's all fluoridated since the 60s. And Sacramento started around 2009. They're down here. And as soon as they started, sure enough, the next year the salmon fishing industry completely collapsed. It's all gone. Because another thing I got to point out is that the Pacific Ocean has fluoride in it at 1 part per million, but it has 410 parts per million calcium. And fluoride is the calcium chelator. It loves to hang out where calcium is. So salmon living in the ocean are not bothered at all with the fluoride. But as soon as you go up into a freshwater river and they're trying to navigate upstream, if that water has any fluoride in it, even 0.3, their brain is all narcotized and they don't know where they're going. So that was discovered by the University of Oregon on the Columbia River until they shut down this industry that was emitting fluoride in the river, and the salmon came back. But the salmon are gone from Sacramento. In Sacramento, the officials there, I think it's a state mandate, you have to fluoridate, you have to fluoridate. I keep telling them, no, you do not. Look at this federal law, and they go, well, states, trumps it. No, there's not. Back and forth. So the salmon are gone. All those people have had to find other jobs. There are no salmon in Sacramento River anymore since 2008.
And you're sure it's because of fluoride?
Well, I can't prove it, but I'm just telling you that the salmon collapsed a year after they started.
That
They
would
had
be-
been there for all the time.
Yes.
This salmon industry that's been in, and I know what happened in the Columbia River because salmon are super sensitive to fluoride. The brain, they can't find their way back to where they spawn. So why would you expect it to be okay when Sacramento starts dumping its fluoride? Most of the fluoride that's put in the water is not eaten. Most of it goes into landscapes, out to sewers, back out into the Sacramento River. Just like here, we dump most of it goes back out in the ocean. It's not actually good. It's just a complete waste of money. It's just a scam.
What is the rationale for the military to be involved with that concept?
Well, that's because at the end of the war, when the nuclear bomb was built to win World War II, they had so much sodium fluoride in piles because you need fluorine to make uranium hexafluoride to enrich the uranium to make a bomb. And there were peach orchards that were being destroyed, cattle that were getting sick. They didn't want to be sued. So when they heard this story, this myth from Colorado, some dentists in there that said, gee, we think this fluoride in the water is making their teeth white and it helps improve their teeth. They put the two together and they started fluoridating in Grand Rapids because the military wanted to get rid of this stuff and have an excuse to say, well, gee, it's good for you. And so the problem is people actually believe it. I mean, I've talked to the...
I used to give my kids flow rate drops.
Yeah, don't do that anymore.
I know, when
That
they were
explains
little.
a lot.
And they have those white spots, I think. Is that from that?
Oh, yeah, that's the only way you can get floats is from...
It is. It does make your teeth white, but only in little tiny pieces.
Yeah, well, the reason they have white spots is because that's a deficient enamel layering. There's not enough enamel on the teeth. Because fluoride interferes with the enamel. And it doesn't allow the enamel to form properly.
I was doing
True
that.
enamel doesn't have any
Being
fluoride.
the good mom.
It's a hydroxyapatite crystalline solid that when you peel all the dentine away from under it and clean it, teeth enamel is clear like a piece of glass. You can see right through it. Because it's not supposed to have fluoride. The crystal structure is perfect and it's super rock hard, and fluoride can't really get in it. HF can, hydrofluoric acid, which is used to frost glass light bulbs, but the fluoride in your toothpaste doesn't even get into the enamel. Fluoride in toothpaste is also worthless. You just end up swallowing it, it goes into your bones. So, forgot what else I was going to say about this slide. So that's good.
Sorry.
Oh yeah, there's out of 195 countries in the whole world, there's only 5 that fluoridate their citizens
English speaking
in this way. And the main one that started it was the United States. And people only started doing it because they trusted us and listened to some of our dental officials. So Ireland, Australia, New Zealand, parts of Canada fluoridated because but most of Canada now is getting clean. They figured it out. All of eastern Canada, the whole Niagara water section, eastern part of Canada, when Peter Quavart figured out what was really going on, what fluoride really was doing, he wrote a little magazine article in their Waterworks Professional. Fluoridation stopped. The whole eastern section of Canada is all clean. British Columbia is now all clean. Prince George was the last city up there that would fluoridate since the 60s. But there was a huge debate. I got involved in it. It was pretty funny because there's a society up there that was trying to get the city to stop fluoridating, and they asked me to help. And there was these fluoridation people that love fluoride, and they write to the newspaper up there and say, you got to fluoridate, or your teeth are going to fall on it, or whatever they say if you don't fluoridate. And so I would respond to all their stuff, and I put in my own stuff. There's a big battle, and there was a vote coming up, and we were just grouping it out online. And I was told later that every time I would hit enter with some comment, the group would all cheer, yay! Found out later, it's pretty funny. But Prince George voted it out, so all of British Columbia is free of fluoride now as well, and the Yukon Territory. So this is, of course, is the periodic table of all the known elements in the universe. And fluoride, like in column 7, is a halide. When it's a negative charge, fluoride is a halide ion. So is chloride, bromide, and iodide. So you can imagine that because it's on the periodic table, it should be on our menu. You know, people actually think and I'm serious, they do. But iodide is a mineral nutrient. You have to have it to have normal thyroid function. It's on your T3 and T4 hormones. You have to have that. Chloride is a mineral nutrient. You have to have that to maintain electrolyte balance in all of your tissue fluids. But bromide and fluoride are both poisons. So just because it's a halide doesn't cover over for what it is. It is a toxic calcium chelate. And it seeks out calcium in your body, and there's nothing that's going to stop it. The reason it's not a normal component, the reason we know it's not just because the FDA ruled that it's not a mineral nutrient. It's because it really isn't. The FDA ruled that based on detailed experiments that were done with research animals, very carefully controlled, 2 labs in the United States and 1 lab in England. They grew mammals for 2 generations on 0 fluoride. 0 fluoride in the water, 0 fluoride in the food. Animals were totally healthy, totally normal lifespan. These animals would have, spontaneous dental caries just by accident. Those were not increased in the absence of fluoride for 2 generations. So the FDA said that's enough. Fluoride is not a mineral nutrient. In 1966, the FDA is helping us. The FDA ruled that they banned the sale of all fluoride compounds intended to be swallowed by pregnant women in the United States. But look, all the pregnant people are drinking fluoridated water now. Nobody cares about these regulations, it seems. But they're still on the books, never have been revoked. That's what the FDA says about fluoride. In 1975, the FDA ruled that fluoride is unsafe to add to foods. But the EPA, all these fluoridation people, they completely ignore the FDA. They just don't care. They think they're deceived somehow. But the FDA ruled that adding fluoride into water is an uncontrolled use of an unapproved drug. Those are the official rulings in the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, and they've never been changed. So I'm just telling you what the FDA says. You don't even have to believe me.
So in other words, the FDA doesn't act on what it has proven.
Well, yes and no. That what they did do is, for example, we'll go into it later, but I mean the FDA has helped, but they're just not confident enough to just ban it forever. They don't care if you use it, but they're advising. The rulings are what I said. It's not a mineral nutrient. You don't need it, and they rule even that fluoride in bone does not strengthen bone. They did studies commissioned by the FDA at the NIH. It doesn't strengthen your bone. It actually hurts the bone. The FDA has all kinds of rulings like that, but they're too afraid to ban it because they know that some people just have to have fluoride. In their mind, they think it's, and it's a strange situation. They don't ban it. You can do it if you want, but it's not approved. The FDA has never approved any fluoride for swallowing. So all these sodium fluoride tablets that doctors still prescribe out here and across the country, well, those are not FDA approved drugs. Never have been. If you talk to a pharmacist in a drugstore, he'll go, "You're crazy," but because they don't read. I don't know what they do. Okay. So this is the chemical that they get from the fertilizer industry because it's too toxic to leave in the fertilizer. It's collected from pollution stacks. They drain it out with water, it dissolves in the water. It's hydrofluoric acid. Fluosilicic acid, H2SiF6. They neutralize it with sodium hydroxide Drano. By the time it comes out of the water, you get the silicic acid, fluoride, and the sodium in the water, plus some heat. Anyway, the fluoride ion itself is really tiny, so you just can't filter it out of water easily. It's just so small. It's about the size of a water molecule itself. Water is HOH that I drew theoretically behind a fluoride sphere. That's about the relative sizes. But, these negatively charged balls, 3,000 trillion of them floating around in your body when you drink fluoridated water. And they say, well, that's a low level, it's only 0.1. Well, low level to who? Anyway, you can't get it out except by reverse osmosis. The modern reverse osmosis units do work, because I've checked them, like these glacier water machines in front of grocery stores. I checked it with my electrodes. 1 part per million going in, 0 coming out. I couldn't believe it, because RO up until then, before San Diego was fluoridated, would never take out the fluoride. They just can't do it.
We don't have
But
that.
they figured it out at a place in Vista. And the glacier water machines are really sophisticated, expensive units inside. And it removes the fluoride out of the water because the pore size is so small the fluoride can't fit through. But under pressure, the water is shaped kind of like a hot dog. It squeezes through sideways, and they achieved separation. So people who ask me, how do I get defluoridated water in my kitchen sink? Well, I usually recommend the General Electric Profile. It's affordable, and it's an RO unit that works. We've tested it. The one at Costco works also.
Good.
The water unit they have. Like I say, the old ones didn't work.
Yes.
You can use bone char, but I don't recommend that anymore. Simply because some people get that kind of a taste out of it. And I knew a guy who had terrible kidneys. He lived with poor kidneys. He was only in his 30s, but he just had this condition. He couldn't take any fluoride, anything unusual. And he had been using an RO instrument, and he was basically hanging in there. And as soon as he switched to a bone char that was recommended to him, not by me, I'm glad I didn't, but the bone char took out all the fluoride, but he detected a taste that nobody else can tell. I couldn't taste it, but he didn't feel as good, so he went back to RO. So I usually recommend the General Profile if you have no access to non-fluoridated water any other way. You can get bottled water. You can buy distilled water from the store. I have a $90 water distiller. I used to do experiments with distilled water. They have really good ones now. But all I do myself, I just haul spring water from either Palomar Mountain spring water or from the Carlsbad Spa up in Carlsbad. Both those waters are really clean. No fluoride.
Carlsbad Spa.
No radiation material, no uranium, nothing.
Mhm.
Carlsbad Spa, yeah, it's water that drains from the Cleveland National Forest all the way under a rock table, all the way across the county over to Carlsbad. And the guy who discovered the well, he founded Carlsbad. And he would give water to the people on the trains when they would come through. That well is still there, and it was ranked by the state as the best, by the state of California, it was awarded as being the healthiest water in the state. Well, it's not the healthiest, but it's really good.
The Palomar Mountain water?
No, the
It's
Carlsbad.
not the same, but it's Carlsbad, the alkaline spa water. I just go there with camping jugs, 6-gallon camping jugs, and I fill those up, bring them home. You're good to go for a month for your drinking and cooking and all that.
Don't they deliver though?
Yeah, but it's
Carlsbad.
expensive.
Palomar does. Palomar delivers, but Carlsbad got to go there.
The Carlsbad does, but it's a limited area.
Area.
So the bottled water isn't good? I mean, the plastic?
Some of them are. That's why
But
that's why I have a list for you.
Okay,
Everybody
thank
wants a
you.
list. Yeah, measured below. So keep going. This was an experiment I did with my water distiller. When they started fluoridating the water, I was prepared for it. And once it all settled in at 1 part per million, when MWD did its thing to our water, I took a gallon of it and boiled it down to 25 milliliters, and it turns into a thing that looks like milk. And that's because the calcium fluoride is not very soluble. It precipitates out at this level. A gallon down to 25, and it started precipitating. So then go down a little lower. I took my bone char filter and removed the fluoride out of it. and then boiled a gallon of that down, and of course, all the way down to 25 milliliters, it's clear, because there was no fluoride in it to precipitate the calcium. These are the precipitates later, they just fall out of the jar. That was from 1 gallon of water. All this junk, your kidneys have to get rid of all this, of course, if you have healthy kidneys. And then the water from Encinitas that's not fluoridated, that boils down and stays clean as well. You'll see residue when it's all gone because there's good calcium and magnesium salts in there. But calcium fluoride is way less soluble than the other ones. It turns into milk.
I didn't catch, what are those three waters from? The one on the left with the...
This is the same water that was up here that was like milk, and you wait 10 or 15 minutes and all the particles sink to the bottom. This water was, after I took this water and removed the fluoride out of it with a bone char filter, then boiled it again, it didn't do that. And then Encinitas water, of course, is clean. It's not fluoridated.
Now, when you say Encinitas water, they have a lot of water districts. They have San Diego water, they have Carlsbad water, and they also have Olivenheim water.
Yeah, Carlsbad water is not Encinitas. That's fluoridated just like San Marcos and Vista.
So Encinitas, when you say Encinitas,
Well, I mean old Encinitas, west of the freeway. Like in Olivenheim, they started fluoridating there about 2014. We all went over to a big group trying to explain. This is even after my paper, so they just all ignored it. It's fluoridated. So Olivenheim is fluoridated. But the old Encinitas, it comes from the water is treated at the Rancho Santa Fe filtration plant. So that covers all the water all the way around Solana Beach up to that corner up to Acadia.
okay.
But East Encinitas, east of the freeway, it's a mess. The pipes are all over the place.
Yeah.
Well, the same is true all over the county. I mean, a lot of places I just can't even tell you if you live in a fluoride house or not. One example is at the Del Mar racetrack. You know, when I was studying all the horses, Del Mar isn't hit with death as badly as Los Alamitos and Hollywood Park were because the horses don't live there. They're only there for racing starts and then they're gone. But Del Mar is fluoridated at the track, and they haven't stopped it because the city of San Diego told them, well, you can have no water at all, or you can have our fluoridated water. That's the only option. Even though Del Mar City Water District doesn't want it, they have no choice. And so the funny thing is, I was telling you about the pipe Denny's. If you're at the Denny's right by the racetrack, that water's fluoridated. If you walk to the other side of the racetrack at the Brigantine restaurant, that water's clean.
Oh, good. We love the brig.
Because I've talked to the owners, and they said, oh yeah, when they built the Brigantine, the Solana Beach pipe was so close, we just tapped the water off there. So that explains, even though they're in Del Mar, they're not fluoridated.
That's funny.
But it's a maze like that in Encinitas. You walk the Home Depot, you have to check every different place because there's so many water pipes from different places. It's a mess. Because one day I thought I'd just do some more work and put a big sign out there saying this restaurant is not fluoridated, this one is, this grocery store is not. But it's too much work.
Yeah,
You know,
definitely.
I don't get paid for this. I got my own work to do.
Is there a affordable fluoride detector meter?
Well, they cost about $350 now,
Okay.
the one I had.
And obviously not one you could put in your pocket.
Yeah, you can put them in your pocket.
You can't.
Does the
Oh, nice
lemon
and
take out fluoride?
Pardon me?
Does the lemon take out the fluoride in? No.
Oh, good try.
This is the train trip that I was telling you about. This is the headwaters of both the Yukon River that goes to Alaska that way through Canada, and it drains this way to Skagway River into Skagway, Alaska. It's just beautiful, delicious water.
You mentioned alkaline water before, and I came from Nebraska, and a new doctor who specifically dealt with diabetes and such. She was really into alkaline water and had a lot of her patients, and I drank it for a while, and I think if you have digestive issues or low acid, stomach acid, that would not be a good thing, would it?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on how much you drink and everything, what you eat with it, stuff like that. You know, you can always squeeze a lemon into it. What else do I have down there? What's next? Okay, well, these are the data that I computed for the person who was killed. Because the person got killed in Alaska, there were 300 people that were poisoned. Some of them were life flighted 150 miles away to Bethel, Alaska, but they all survived. They had terrible pain, GI pain, because the fluoride all turns into hydrofluoric acid in your stomach. That's the stuff that dissolves glass. And the 100 parts per million, it was just too much. They were just keeling over. One person didn't make it. His blood fluoride was 3 parts per million. These are millimolar units. But anyway, I did this analysis to try to figure out if he got killed because the fluoride was keeping the calcium from going into his heart when his heart was beating, or was it a direct effect of the fluoride on the heart tissue itself? And it turns out it was the former, not the latter, because circulating calcium levels in the blood range from maybe here to here, the normal blood range, and these are the fluoride levels that will cause the calcium to precipitate in a water solution. So his levels are about here, and it was enough to make it so it would be like the milky fluid I showed you. It's that kind of concentration between the calcium in the blood and the fluoride that he had was enough to cause these precipitates. You don't see them in a person that's killed with fluoride poisoning. People who ingest a lot of rat poison or ingest too many fluoride tablets, you don't see these precipitates, but it doesn't really have to precipitate. It's just that the higher the fluoride, the less mobility the calcium ion has because they like associating with each other. So, every time the heart beats, it's only because calcium rushes in from outside the cell into the heart cells to bind to the filaments inside. So every time your heart goes lub-dub, it's because the calcium goes in, pump back out, back in, back out, over and over. It depends on extracellular calcium. The heart does. It's not like skeletal muscle that has its own SR, that has its own calcium. Heart doesn't have that. So that's important because when we go talk about bones, the function of the bone is not just to hold you up when you walk down the road. It's a repository for blood calcium to make sure your heart is stable all the time. If you're not eating any calcium at all, you're out starving yourself somewhere, well, the bone is dissolved to make sure your heart is going to be okay. That's the function of your bone, to keep your heart. And so, we'll keep going, I guess. This is an example of what I meant. These are membrane potential changes in a heart cell or heart tissue, where the first thing that happens is when the cell is electrically depolarized, the sodium rushes into the cell and depolarizes it. And then the second phase in heart cell, but not in muscle, is that the calcium all this time is rushing inside the cell from outside to activate the filaments to contract the muscle. And then potassium rushes back out and repolarizes it later. So that happens every time you have a heartbeat. Calcium in, calcium out.
And also, I want to note that nobody ever talks about vitamin K except that when you're on Coumadin or warfarin, you can't eat too many green vegetables because then you will stop the clotting action, you'll inhibit the action of your warfarin. But if you notice the calcium, the K up there, vitamin K, is the traffic cop for calcium. And it's really important. Another element that's very important to us. And they told us to take all this wonderful calcium, but if you don't have the vitamin K there, it's not going to go where it needs to go. So that's another myth we're going to debunk again.
Anyway, that's a different phenomenon, but it's important. But this is K+. That plus should be up higher.
Yeah.
Isn't it
potassium ion?
potassium?
Yeah, it's potassium ion.
Oh, that's potassium. That's not vitamin K. Excuse me.
No.
Never
Anyway,
mind.
these are all electrical ions that have to move in and out, when the heart beats. So it's depolarized. Calcium rushes in because of that, because it opens a little pore to let it go in. That activates the contractile filaments to contract. And then the channels close shut again, and then the pumps pump the calcium back out. And it's a pretty miraculous system. Every time your heart beats, this happens. Let's keep going. This is my work here also. This is what happens when you take a fluoride sample where 100% of it is fluoride as the ion, and you start adding a weak acid into it to lower the pH. So at pH 7 in regular water, it's all fluoride. But when you add enough acid to lower the pH down to where the pH of the stomach is, around 2, there is no fluoride anymore. It's all hydrofluoric acid. It's protonated by the HCl in our stomach. So this is the hydrofluoric acid measurement that goes up. Because the fluoride is going down, the fluoride is turning into hydrofluoric acid in the stomach. And that's not only what hurt the horses, I think, but it also hurts 7% of people. When they drink fluoridated water, their stomach hurts. And it's not a really painful thing, but it's annoying. That was done in Europe by Peterborg. 7% of people, just particularly old people where their stomach lining is not turning over well, they drink fluoridated water, does not agree with them. And that's why. It's all hydrofluoric acid in the stomach. Now, because hydrofluoric acid has no negative charge, it's not like the little negative charge balls anymore. It's a neutral molecule that's so tiny and no charge, it just scoots right through any lipid bilayer. Just goes right through. So most of the fluoride gets into the blood, gets there from the stomach because it was first converted to hydrofluoric acid, which leaks into the blood. And then in the blood, which is pH 7.4, it's reionized back to fluoride. So we'll keep going. So when you swallow fluoride, what happens is it goes through the GI tract, of course, but in the stomach, probably half of what you eat is assimilated into the blood. The other half is neutralized and you poop it out. But the problem is once it gets into the blood, it's water soluble and just distributes everywhere. Nothing stops it from going absolutely everywhere. Dr. John Yamamonis in the 60s, he published Fluoride, the Aging Factor. And he measured the tissue levels of fluoride all throughout the different organ systems, and they're all contaminated with the fluoride. It goes inside the brain cells, red cells, inside the red blood cells at 0.1 parts per million. It starts inhibiting the sodium potassium ATPase in there. And Dr. Shushila in India proved that when you drink fluoridated water, 1 ppm, you have a slight anemia. And why would you expect you would? It's kind of like smoking a cigarette. You might live a normal life, but it's not really as good as it could be because you've got some anemia when you're on fluoridated water.
Is there any thing that neutralizes it so that
After it's in here?
Yeah, like right
no,
now, if
just
we could
stopping
take
the intake,
something.
just stop the intake, and it'll all urinate away and go to the bones. And
How
you
long
get
would
your
that
blood
take?
level. Well, not too long because people drink water every single day to maintain that level, and your urine collects the volume of water that goes in, comes out as urine.
Okay, so
and the
it
concentration
can
of
be
the urine
flushed.
for fluoride is about the same as what's in the water. You drink 1 ppm fluoride water, the urine is usually about 1 ppm. The blood is about 0.1. So the urine is trying to get rid of it, but the bone is sucking it up too. The fluoride just attacks the bone, absorbs calcium, and once it's in the bone, you can't get it out. There's no way to get it back out.
Well,
Just stop it.
what does fluoride do when it gets into your bone?
Well, we'll get to that next. But anyway, what else was I going to say? The other thing I don't like about the Levy treatment plant that you have here, the Helix Levy plant, is I noticed that you have kind of a highish aluminum level. When they add aluminum into water to suck out all the leaves and the organic matter and all that, there's always some aluminum left in the water. But yours here is about 5 times higher than the aluminum in Lake Skinner. So when you couple that with fluoride together with the aluminum, you have aluminum fluoride complexes that form in the stomach, and the aluminum can be taken up. And that lodges in the brain. Over a lifetime, you get a lot of aluminum in the brain. That's found in a lot of Alzheimer's disease victims that have a lot of aluminum in their brain. Not all cases, but I think aluminum is just one way to get a form of dementia. It's not the only way, but it's one way.
Mm-hmm.
And the aluminum level is allowed. Your water district is right. The EPA allows the level of aluminum that you do have, but it bothers me that it's 5 times higher than everybody else around here. Why is that? They should tone that down.
Sure.
But they're not going to listen to people. They tend not to do that.
The one thing you told us, me and because I bought a Berkey filter,
Yeah.
and you were saying that because our water here in Southern California, explain that to me again because I didn't understand.
Well, we have alkaline water here, about pH 8.2, so the hydroxide level is concentrated enough. It binds to aluminum better than fluoride does. So those filters don't work because they're degraded by the hydroxide out of the water. They might take out fluoride for maybe a few weeks, but then they stop it. I've tested
Oh,
it.
shit.
And besides, aluminum hydroxide and aluminum fluoride can leak out of the fluid.
Into the water.
Yeah, they're illegal in state counties.
What's illegal?
Berkey aluminum adapters to put on a Berkey filter to filter out the fluoride. You can do it in Michigan, places like that that don't have such alkaline water, but you can't do it here.
So you said something that's stuck in my mind. You said once it gets into the bone, it stays there.
Yeah.
What are the physiological consequences of it being in the bone?
Well, we'll get to that. It's coming up. So, there's one thing I forgot to say. When the Hoover Bay disaster happened, remember, he was killed from a heart block because the blood fluoride was about 3 parts per million. So, another thing that FDA has helped us with is that for quite a while, people that didn't have kidneys and they were in kidney dialysis units and they had to have their blood dialyzed, they were using fluoridated water to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what happens then, the blood level matches what was in the water. So these poor kidney victims in the hospital getting dialyzed, they had 1 ppm fluoride in their blood. That's a third of what causes heart block. Well, what happens at 1 ppm? In animal studies, the fluoride at that level starts degenerating your heart cells. They start getting swollen, starts degrading the myofibrils inside. And so the FDA noticed, and so did the doctors treating the patients, that they had a really high morbidity after months of time when people were on this stuff. And they finally figured out it was the fluoride, so the FDA made a ruling, the kidney dialysis unit cannot use fluoridated water, according to the FDA. Now, why they just won't ban it for the whole country, I don't know. They just do little piecemeal things, which is better than nothing. But that's the situation, that you're not allowed to use fluoridated water in the kidney ward, fortunately. Okay. This is a poor volunteer in a hospital who volunteered to do a PET scan of a radioactive isotope of fluoride to see where it went when it was injected.
My goodness.
And I'm totally against all these kind of unethical studies. It was a volunteer, but now that it's been done, we have the data. And everywhere where it's dark black like that's where fluoride accumulates. It's really quick. Fluoride's injected. Notice how it goes into his hip bones, his spine, goes into his urine, of course, in the bladder. But that's what happens. Fluoride just has a tendency to just glob onto bone before the kidneys can get rid of it all. Now, the good thing is when fluoride is trapped by the bone, it's not there to harm your heart and other organs. But the bad thing is your bone is getting affected. It's getting fluoridated. From every sip that you take, you're adding more fluoride into your bone, and you cannot get it back out because hydroxyfluoroapatite is not soluble at blood pH, in extracellular fluid pH. You can only dissolve it in acid. Well, if you dissolve it in acid, you've killed the person. So you can't get rid of it.
What level of fluoride was he given, and how long did it take for that?
This was done at the VA Medical Center research group. It was just injected, and maybe 10 minutes later, 15 minutes later, they took the PET scan.
You mean one injection?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
They just want to know where fluoride went. Why? I don't know, but there's people who think that fluoride is good for you, and the whole country is fluoridated, so why not study it? I'm against all of it. Yeah.
And it'd be interesting what his urine output. I had fluoride poisoning over, I would say, from 2005 or maybe even earlier. They were giving me medications with fluoride in it, and then I had a perfect storm from 2005 to 2014. So it took that long to manifestate really ugly symptoms that I would take notice of and say, I think I really
were
have to
those
do something.
fluorine drugs or
They were
fluoride?
fluoride-containing drugs.
Those are CF bonds, carbon fluorine bonds, and those are also dangerous, but they have different toxicology than the fluoride ion. That's why the symptoms are delayed. So there's a lot of fluorine drugs now. Like 20% of our drugs are all fluorinated, all from chemists. They have no clue what the physiology is. They just fluoride it because it's economically better for them, and they think they're helping people by having a more efficacious drug, but it never works out because what happens is the drug is still metabolized, even though the CF bond is not. So it's broken down, the drug doesn't work anymore, so you have to take another sample of drug anyway to keep the effect going. So it achieves nothing, except people are accumulating these carbon fluorine fragments that are really lipophilic. They accumulate in the brain, accumulate in fat tissue, membranes. Nobody knows what's happening to these poor people. People on things like Crestor, Simvastatin. There's a Pravastatin natural statin that works just as good as those, and it doesn't have fluoride. If you really have to take cholesterol lowering drug, I recommend Pravastatin. Anyway, these CF fragments, you're right. They can have delayed effects. Look at Levaquin, some of these fluorine antibiotics. People are cured of their infection, they're all happy, and they walk down the road and their tendon falls off. Well,
Yeah.
what do you think is going to happen with these strange compounds that cannot be metabolized? Okay. A friend of mine, Declan Waugh, is an environmental scientist from Ireland who's been working so hard for years on this because Southern Ireland listened to our dental officials from the U.S. and they fluoridate all of the citizens everywhere in Southern Ireland, which is the purple regions. The green region is Northern Ireland, and they rejected the U.S.'s idea, and they do not fluoridate their people. And this is a graph of cancer incidence. This happens to be pancreatic cancer and bone and CNS cancers. The darker the purple, the higher the incidence of the cancers in the people. The green, that's way lower incidence. And see this weird red line that divides the two countries? People don't realize what that is. That is actually an ancient cow path. where the cattle would migrate from one end of the island to the other, and they made this natural trail. So when they had the strife between, the Christians and the Catholics and all that, they decided to become two countries. They just used the cow path as their border. So it delineates the two countries, but it also delineates who fluoridates and who does not, and who has the higher cancer incidence and who does not. Go to the next page. Same thing happens with all kinds of heart ailments. On the next page.
What cancer is this?
Pardon me?
Ireland.
What cancer were you?
That was pancreatic and nervous system cancer. And bone cancer also goes up, but it's so rare, people don't talk about it much. And then this is a similar kind of graph done by the Irish government. And Declan gave me this stuff because, again, that cow path trail that demarcates fluoridated versus unfluoridated, the dark red stuff, these are a high incidence of cardiovascular mortality for all causes other than an infarction, other than a clot blocking an artery. Things like cardiomyopathy, congestive heart failure. So I think what's going on is the people they drink tea as well. Bois thinks it's part of that, but I don't think so because Northern Ireland, I'm sure, also drinks tea. It's that they're fluoridated, and for some reason it's probably softish water. It's just the same thing that's happening to research animals in a cage. When you put them on 1 ppm in the blood, their heart muscle degenerates. Something's going on where these people are having a high incidence of all these cardiovascular deaths. This is like a 9-year period that they looked at. So Declan's been fighting government over there just like people here fight our government, trying to get it stopped.
What's the resistance?
There are people who are dead set on believing that fluoride is good. There's the California State Chief Fluoridation Officer up in San Francisco. I've talked to him for months, and that was after I wrote the article about the Hooper Bay disaster. He said, well, Richard, it wasn't water fluoridation's fault for why the guy had the heart blockage. I go, it wasn't. Well, what was it then? He goes, well, it was his wife's fault. I said, when he was his wife's fault? He goes, well, the wife was a nurse, and she should have known that when he threw up the first glass of water, that it must have had too high a fluoride content. Because when it's high fluoride, you throw it up. And so she's the nurse, should have known, and gave him more water because he was so thirsty that day. And so the wife killed him. I said, okay, so you're trying to tell me that this lady went all around the whole town of Hooper Bay, Alaska, and poisoned 302 people? And then he caught himself about how stupid he was being. And then he knew he was in a corner then, and he goes, well, I just do what the CDC tells me, Richard. He believes that fluoridation needs to be done. He thinks you're deficient. There's people in New York who've been parents who gave their kids bottled water instead of fluoridated water, and city officials yelled at them saying that you're depriving your kids of good teeth.
That's right.
So some people just believe this. It's complete nonsense. I mean, the fluoride level that's in the blood,
You never told me.
they'll say is 0.1 parts per million. That's the goal to get it there. And they say that'll help your teeth, but it's not high enough to damage any tissue, which is nonsense because your enamel is the hardest substance in the whole body. If it's too low in the blood to damage any tissue, but yet somehow miraculously it strengthens your rock-hard teeth enamel, it makes absolutely no sense. But the brainwashing that they've allowed their brain to fall into, it's just almost impossible to get rid of out of some people. And these people are powerful because they're under the direction of the CDC, not the health aspects of the CDC, but the oral health division, the dentists that came over from before there was a CDC, from military. The Surgeon General brags about how great fluoride is. You have to do that to be a Surgeon General.
Have there been any good clinical studies on the effect of fluoride or the level of absorption from fluoride in toothpaste?
Yeah,
What
read the
was
NRC
this
test.
question?
How much fluoride gets in there from toothpaste?
From eating toothpaste.
Yeah, if you look at the NRC did a big comprehensive study on that. Out of all the fluoride that's in your blood in a fluoridated sea in America, where you also use fluoride toothpaste, about 65% of all the fluoride is from the drinking water. About 15%, maybe 10% from toothpaste use. So the biggest things to do is just don't drink any more fluoridated water. Don't use fluoridated toothpaste. That's a huge deal right there. The rest of it comes from foods. Grocery stores have their veggies out there. They just wash them in city water. If you buy those, rinse them off with good water first, at least. But vegetables, fortunately, do not take up fluoride. Fluoride is not allowed to go through their roots in vegetables. I tested watermelon fluid; it's all clean. So if you don't have any other water, just buy a watermelon. Get some water that way. I learned that that's how lemurs live in Madagascar. They don't ever drink water. The lemur little monkeys, they eat watery fruits. That's a whole source of water.
Speaking of, if you need any fluoride-free toothpaste, our dental practice is a fluoride-free practice, and we have fluoride-free toothpaste.
I like this place. I use baking soda, but it's nicer than the toothpaste. My uncle used baking soda his whole life. He lived to be 85, never had one cavity.
Wow.
Just never had one. Lived on a farm in India. No floor. Okay, well, this is what happens to bone from the beginning of your first sip. The fluoride just starts accumulating. And this was done in England, where it was natural fluoride, and that was before there was ever fluoridated toothpaste. So, you can estimate how bad we are off now because we are using industrial fluoride that's assimilated better than natural fluoride. And we have fluoridated toothpaste in this country too, but these people, I think this is 0.9 ppm, that was 8.8 ppm in the water. Well, after 40 years, you're getting up into the thousands of milligrams per kilogram of fluoride in the bone. And notice, it never saturates. It's not a mineral nutrient. A real nutrient like vitamin C or something, it does a physiologic effect that is saturable, and when you wash it away, it comes back down. This never washes away. It just keeps growing in the bone.
Now, when your bones, because you use your bone to give calcium out, your body interchanges calcium ions and everything. Does it
Right.
drag any fluoride out with it?
No,
or
that's the problem. The fluoride stays in there, and what it does is it alters the crystal structure of the bone. So fluoroapatite has a different shape to it and size to it than normal hydroxyapatite, and it weakens bone. As soon as you start eating it, you're generating bone of poor quality when the fluoride goes in there. Because the bone is responding to the poisoning. It's a poisonous insult. So it's the only toxic chemical I know of that elevates both parathyroid hormone and calcitonin at the same time. Because those are opposite effects, like you said, on the bone at the same time. That's not supposed to be ever happen.
Can they cause or make osteoporosis worse?
It makes it worse. But what happens is that it stimulates parathyroid hormone because the bone knows the bone is responsible for maintaining blood calcium. So you start assimilating fluoride, calcium levels start dropping for any reason. Parathyroid hormone is stimulated to resorb the bone and make sure your blood and your heart are okay. But the reason calcitonin goes up, which forms bone, it's trying to build more bone, is because the fluoroapatite that you're creating doesn't respond to parathyroid hormone, and the bone knows it. The body's so smart, it starts to build extra bone because you're taking away the functional bone when you have fluoride in it. So calcitonin also goes up. So you're building bone and tearing it apart at the same time when you're drinking fluoridated water. You can walk around all day and never know this stuff, but it's ongoing in you. Now, fluoride poisoning around here may not be as bad as in Seattle and places that have no calcium in the water, because we at least have 60 parts per million calcium in the water, about the same as the calcium level in our blood. That helps. But still, why mess with it? What do I have next? This, believe it or not, is a person who died of bone fluorosis. This was his leg bone. Now, this is a stage 3 skeletal fluorosis. You have so much fluoride accumulated that notice how thick it is compared to a normal leg bone, and all these spicules sticking out. I don't know if it's calcium fluoride deposits or if it's fluoroapatite, but the bone is trying to struggle to stay alive, and it just can't do it. He was overloaded. This is probably maybe 12,000 parts per million fluoride in the bone, and your life ends then because you can't walk anymore. Those spicules hurt; they tear your tissue when you try to walk.
Can't imagine.
This was presented at the Museum of Man when they had an exhibit on bone diseases of man at Balboa Park. And so I wrote to them after I took this information and the picture. I'm glad I took it when it did, because when I wrote to them, they freaked out. They just freaked out because San Diego had just started fluoridating water, and the zoo totally keeps its mouth shut because it's learned that if they complain about fluoridated water, all their donations from their expensive donors just dry up. And so they're so deceived, they think they're helping kids by fluoridating water. So the zoo doesn't object, and they just deal with it.
But what about their animals and
Well,
water?
the monkeys pay a price. They won't have as long a lifespan. Monkeys, but what happened to the alligators? The alligators I was worried about were the gharial alligators that stay in the water almost all the time. And I went down there one day. I don't know what it was, but I showed up, hoping to take a picture of its teeth. This is before the San Diego fluoridated water. And there this alligator was outside on the shore with his giant chopper just right by the glass. Just looking at me. I was taking a bunch of pictures.
I'm ready.
It was so cool, yeah. And then I came back a month later after fluoridation started. He was already dead.
Oh.
And so the zoo, of course, denies that it was fluoride. And it may not have been fluoride. I can't prove it. But after fluoridation started, that's what happened to both gharial alligators. They live in the water. Now, that happened in Kansas City. They had an alligator zoo. When Kansas City fluoridated the water, the whole zoo, alligators were wiped out. It goes into alligator cartilage. They have a cartilage system, and it expands their volume. It's just a mess. Those alligators were all killed in Kansas City. That's why I went to the zoo in the first place. So I never got to take my pictures after they were already gone. And so I took an article that was published in Fluoride by one of the people I used to work with. He's passed away now, but he did the work on alligators. And I took him that article. The zoo people, the zoo vet wouldn't come out to talk to me. Nobody from the zoo would come out. So I walked up to the lady who pushes out the baby strollers and talks to people. I said, "Could you give this to the office in there?" So they took it in there. Next thing I know, a few months later, they shut down the whole gharial alligator exhibit, had it all boarded off, and I asked the construction people what was going on, and they said, "Well, we're redoing the water supply, and we're going to put RO water like they have to have for the frogs, because frogs cannot tolerate living in fluoridated water." So the frogs and now the gharial alligator exhibit is all defluoridated water, plus they mix in seawater now too, so that's good. Seawater has so much calcium that will protect them. This is
My
a
wife's
process
spots.
that now it's been estimated now by the CDC that 56% of all American teenagers have fluorosis in their dental
Yeah.
56%.
Right, it is.
And that's why the Health and Human Services lowered the fluoride level from 1 down to 0.7 to try to deal with it, but it's still expanding. The latest data is it's still just going up. And it's not fluoride getting into the teeth. That's the misconception. Fluoride can't get into an enamel. It's just too hard. It's not like bone. It's the same chemical formula. It's hydroxyapatite, but it's really packed really tight. Like I say, it's like glass. It's not soft like bone. But fluoride can get into the teeth. Fluoride can't get into the teeth enamel. But the white spots are there because it prevents the enzymes that are normally there when a kid develops his teeth from removing the myelogene protein out of there in the albumin. It's trapped in there. So that's proteins that are trapped in the enamel where it doesn't belong after the tooth is grown, and it's permanent. Can't get rid of it unless you just replace the tooth. So that's what fluoride is actually doing to people's teeth. It doesn't help them. It either does nothing or it hurts them. One of the two. CDC has admitted that fluoride from the blood does not decrease dental decay. So then I wrote to them and I said, "Well, that's great. Now, why do you still want to fluoridate?" And they go, "Well, it must work topically when you drink it." So I wrote back and I said, "Okay, look at the NRC data, look at the saliva level of the fluoride that's bathing teeth topically, and you'll find that it drains out of the blood at only 0.016 parts per million. That's 95,000 times less concentrated than fluoride in toothpaste. Doesn't have a rat's chance of topically affecting dental decay. So eating and drinking fluoride is absolutely worthless for helping teeth. No effect whatsoever on improving teeth." And then they stopped writing back.
I was just going to ask you what you say.
This was some of the data from the racehorse breakdowns I was telling you about at Los Alamitos. Fluoridation was not carried out until 2007. As soon as they started fluoridating, the racehorse death just skyrocketed. Right here, it dropped down a bit. The data in Hollywood Park is even cleaner. This is Los Alamitos. Hollywood Park went up on this. As soon as they lowered it from 1 to 0.7, the death rate went down there. Perfect. You could tell what the fluoride level was in the water based on the death rate at the racetrack. Okay.
And the racehorses also died of heart attacks?
No, it was a mixed bag, but I think the most common one was that what was happening is, like I said, they race with ulcers. 90% of horses have ulcers when they're in the racing industry. They're out in the pasture and doing other stuff. They never have ulcers, but in the racing world, they have ulcers. Usually you can live with it, but you can't with fluoridated water. And the hydrofluoric acid is just too much. I mean, even in normal people, 7% of normal people, you get bad heartburn. A racehorse with an ulcer, you spray HF on it, and he's trying to turn a corner when he's racing full speed. What do you think is going to happen?
Yeah.
He's going to be happy about it? No. So trips, falls over, breaks the bone, and then that's it. Most of them were bone breaks. But some were heart complications as well, but I lumped them all together. I couldn't get into all that. I'm not even paid for this. Okay, this is just a theoretic thing that I put in because, you know, if you don't see the bottom. This is 3 parts per million in the blood, and it kills you in 1 day. In this range here, if that level's in your blood, you have instant heart block. 1 part per million, like the kidney dialysis people, you're dead in maybe a few months. If you have no fluoride in your blood, or at least undetectable amounts, or at least low enough, you can live a normal life. And when you are fluoridated, this is the question. I don't know where to put it, and so I would never publish anything like this. This is just for discussion purpose. But your life is going to be compromised when you're living on even 1 ppm fluoridated water, where the level in the blood is 0.1. Now, the level can vary because if you have a really good diet with a lot of calcium, you can help yourself. Again, if you have a good amount of iodine to prevent any thyroid issues, that's fine. But most people, they're going to be walking around having an elevated TSH that stimulates your thyroid to make sure your thyroxine levels are normal. So you think you're normal, but you're not. And they're going to have elevated parathyroid hormone and calcitonin to keep your heart normal with the calcium levels, and you're going to think you're normal, but you're not. And so the extent of it, you can never tell unless you actually measure the clinical measurements on the people.
Well,
Everybody's
doesn't
going to be different.
that age kind of matches up with where Social Security, so they're kind of like,
There you go.
you know, I'm sorry, but I think the government, you know, is like, keep this fluoridation because then, you know,
Yeah,
we'll
get rid of these people. They're in the
keep
way.
them down, kill them off at 70, you know, and then you don't have to pay for 5 years and we're done, you know.
Honestly, it's thinking something.
Nothing's a matter of.
Okay, a lot of people ask me, well,
What do you
what about
think
fluoride
of that?
toothpaste? Can I
Like
still
an
use
phone?
that? Well, don't use that either. Because all it does is, even when you take fluoride gels, there's 12,000 parts per million fluoride, and you drop them on the teeth, the fluoride does not get into the enamel. It just makes these calcium fluoride globules that you can find on a scanning electron microscope examination. And as soon as you eat something or drink something, those all dissolve, and it ends up in your bone anyway. It doesn't go into the teeth. So fluoride in toothpaste is absolutely worthless. And you swallow it. 15% of your blood fluoride comes from toothpaste. This is a study that was recently published by a semi-honest guy. He was probably paid by toothpaste people. But at least he showed that the caries incidence stays the same whether you have no fluoride in toothpaste or all the way up to 500. The caries rate was not affected by 0 to 500 fluoride. But then, I call it an anomaly. He suddenly sees, oh, look, there's a lowering here right at 1,000. Then if you put in 2,000, 5,000, there's no further increase. There's really nothing going on. It's just an aberration. It's just an experimental error. But he bragged about, oh, well, make sure toothpaste is 1,500. It's just the attitude. This was from the Fluoride Action Network, and I like the graph because I think what's really going on is tooth decay rates are going down around the world and the United States, and they have been for a long time, even since 1940. But it's not fluoride, because fluoride water didn't start. It spread across the U.S. around 1960. This has nothing to do with fluoride water. And it has nothing to do with fluoridated toothpaste that came in even later. So I think what it is was the invention of the toothbrush.
There you go.
And then the funny thing is, people that are getting fluoride-related illnesses, and especially dental fluorosis, it's so obvious. It's the first visible sign of tooth fluorosis, of fluoride poisoning. The fluoridated toothpaste people, well, they're contributing to it, but they blame the water people. And the reason is because the FDA has on the box of every fluoride toothpaste that you buy, it says do not swallow and do not use if you're under 6 years old. So they say they're being safe because we're telling people not to swallow it. So it's the water people that fluoridate the water, where they want you to drink it, they're the culprits. Then you talk to the water people and they'll say, well, no, we started first. And the toothpaste people came in after us, so it's the toothpaste people that kicked it over the edge, and that's what's causing the fluorosis problem in the kids. They all point fingers at everybody else and nothing gets done with either of them.
Now, that's true. Like, if a woman is drinking fluoridated water, or she's got some, in her lifetime or whatever, during her pregnancy, she's taking some kind of medication that has fluoride in it, she is really fluoridating those
Oh,
cells
yeah.
in that
Fluoride
baby.
not only crosses the blood-brain barrier, it crosses from the placenta into the fetus. It doesn't do anything for the kid's teeth health later on.
No.
The FDA has proven that. That's why they banned the sale of any fluoride compound that is intended to be swallowed by a pregnant female in the United States. The sale of those drugs are banned. Does anybody, did you guys know that?
No.
See what I mean? Nobody really knows it except the FDA. Even people at the FDA don't know it. You have to show them in their own regulations that came out in 1966, and then they go, "Oh yeah, you're right." Well, okay, why don't we do something? Why don't we enforce it?
Mm.
They just make the rules, they're not the enforcers.
There you
I've
go.
heard that
That's what's
before.
going on.
So, based on what you just said, the more fluoride a pregnant woman takes in, the more likely her baby will be to have autism.
What happens is you have neurologic issues in kids that are exposed to fluoride in utero.
Oh my.
Yeah, Becklin was doing a lot of stuff on that. Shows the same kind of map, following the cow path. I couldn't even possibly begin to cover all the effects that fluoride can have in different subgroups of people, because everybody is different than someone else. They have different individual variabilities, different things that they're most sensitive about. But you could spend months on this. You just can't do that now. But another common one is just pretty much everybody's going to have a slight anemia when you live on fluoride water. And so it was found out by Dr. Albert Schatz. He's passed away now, but he won the Nobel Prize for discovering streptomycin. Really good scientist. He knew about this stuff. He knew that infant mortality being so high in the U.S., we're only 34th in the world as far as infant mortality. We have a dismal record here.
Mm-hmm.
He knew that fluoridated water was contributing to this. And he found out that in Chile, these undernourished kids were having a really high infant mortality. And he went down there because it was a fluoridated country. He told them to stop fluoridating. So President Allende at the time, in the 70s, he stopped it. And the infant mortality plummeted. And so I was all happy about that until I took a trip to Victoria, Canada, and I was having this tooth. This lady came out and I was telling her all, and she goes, "Oh yeah, my mother has, kidney disease. We're so glad that she lives in Chile, and we're so glad." But they restarted fluoridating in Chile. This was done by Ziegelbecker. This is the most definitive data, I think, that proves that drinking water fluoride does not change the cavity decay rate. This is natural levels of fluoride that's in drinking water from 0.2 all the way up to 6. Nothing really happens to the decay rate, but he found out that the same cities that were studied in 1939 are in there, and the guy picked one of these, and one of these, and he goes, "Oh, look what fluoride does! It decreases dental decay." And when you look at all the cities, all the available data from here and the UK, that's a lot of stuff in there. There is no trend. That fluoride doesn't do anything to decrease cavities, but what it does do is it increases dental fluorosis progressively. Every city that fluoridates has an increased incidence of dental fluorosis, and there's no exceptions. These are a bunch of references that support all this stuff I've been telling you. That was the original FDA declaration that fluoride is not a mineral nutrient, and blah, blah, blah. Down here I had some special stuff just for you guys. Another page down. This is your guys' water in La Mesa. The Helix levy plant is right here. Our water from Lake Skinner's here. Some of this is blended into here, depending on the season. You need a mix of all this. But this is what bothered me when I saw the aluminum level up to 380. I mean, the government allows it up to numbers like this, but I mean, Lake Skinner is only 50.
Wow.
So you're talking about 7 times higher aluminum. So you're doing something funny, but when they add aluminum to get all the debris out of your drinking water, the Helix levy plant.
Is there something that rate would be required in order to get out of the water?
You mean, do they have to
Is there
be
something in
told?
the water that they need to put that much in to take care of it?
Well, yeah, but since this is all a residual after it's all been filtered out, obviously they put too much in.
That's it?
Yeah. That happened in Flint, Michigan, when they had to use all kinds of stuff to treat the water when they switched. You probably
Yeah.
heard about all that. And they used
The lead.
really high chlorination
I'm feeling a
levels.
little sick.
But that's not what's going on here. You don't have data like that.
Go back up, there's the fluoride. The fluoride is 0.6,
Mhm.
0.7.
Yeah, all of them are pretty consistent that way. Because HHS told them to lower it from 1 down to 0.7. Like I said, that was a big deal. We're all happy about that.
And when did that take place?
That was right when San Diego started fluoridate, so that was 2011.
2011?
Sounds like we need a Clean Water Act.
No, a clean aluminum act. Aluminum.
Have I talked enough? Okay.
You were great. So now, we love hearing